Hey, what's up guys? This is Neal Reyes and I want to welcome you to today's episode of Champions Minute. You know, I talk to people all the time who tell me they wish they were closer to God, and I tell them that in order to grow closer to God, you've got to increase in Him and decrease in self. And in order to do that, you're going to have to learn how to crucify the flesh. Get ready. Today's topic that we're going to be speaking about is called Crucifying the Flesh. Again, today's topic is Crucifying the Flesh. I remember when I first heard that phrase, it was from my father-in-law. I remember we were hanging out one day and I think I was over at their house spending time with my wife. This is before we got married. And I remember him telling me as a young believer that I was going to have to learn how to crucify the flesh. Now, I can't tell you what we were talking about that day. I was probably talking about something I wanted to purchase or I wanted to buy or something along that ways. But when he told me, I remember sitting in there and thinking, oh, that sounds painful. That doesn't sound fun at all. But little did I know that it would be something throughout my course and my walk with the Lord that I would continually do over and over again. When we talk about the word crucify, we obviously equate that to something dying, which is what it is, but it's not painful like you would think. In fact, what I would tell you is that the Lord showed me early in my walk that I was like this flower bed when He showed me a glimpse inside my heart, that my heart was like a rose garden, but that it was a rose garden that had been left unattended for far too long. And if you know how most rose gardens go, you can have beautiful rose bushes, but if it's left unattended, after a while, weeds will move in and they'll begin to grow up and choke the life out of the beautiful life that's there. So He showed me He wanted to start working in my life in ways where He would weed eat, so to speak, my garden, where He would pull the weeds out. And at first that seemed like it was such a challenging task to trust Him with that, because all I saw were these giant weeds when He showed me the picture. And I'm talking, they were more like bushes. I mean, they were big in my heart, okay? And when He showed me that, all I could think of was when He grabbed the weed and pulled it out, that it was going to leave this giant hole in my heart that was going to be a void. But He showed me later that any time He's weed eating or pulling the weeds out of the garden of our heart, God never pulls something out without planting something in its place. And what God did was, as He was finding those weeds and grabbing them and pulling them out, going through what I refer to as spiritual surgery, as He would pull those things out, He would then turn around and cultivate the ground and get it ready and plant something beautiful there instead that was going to grow up and be gorgeous. Well, I've allowed Him to do that in my life over and over again. And I want to talk with you today a little bit about crucifying the flesh. You know, I have believers that'll talk to me all the time. They'll come up to me, whether if it's at my speaking engagements or whether I'm just, they know my walk and they know who I am, or they know me through my family. Sometimes these will be people I just interact with when I'm out shopping or buying something. They'll open up in a conversation with me, and somehow it comes to, me speaking for the Lord, or just simply maybe I don't even talking about speaking. They just can tell that I've got God on my life, which as believers, that's what we should do. Our light should be able to shine like a beacon for others to see. They may not know what you have on your life, but they should know you have something worthwhile on it. And when people speak to me, oftentimes they'll tell me like, man, I feel so distant from God, or I want to know God better, but I wish I was closer to God. I just don't know how. And I'm going to tell you what I tell them. If you want to grow in your relationship with the Lord, no matter where you're at, whether if you're just starting off in your walk or whether you're a seasoned believer of 40, 50 years and you've been walking with Him and growing in Him daily, the plan and path to continue to grow with Him stays the same. You've got to continue to allow Him to increase in you and you to decrease. In other words, more of Him and less of you within inside of you. And the way you do that is by learning to crucify the flesh. I'm going to give you some good examples of what I mean by this. When we talk about crucifying the flesh, it doesn't always pertain to this, but sometimes it simply means putting down the desires of the flesh and submitting to the Spirit. It tells us in the Word that the flesh cannot understand the Spirit, and the Spirit is contrary to the flesh, meaning that the flesh cannot understand the Spirit, and the Spirit doesn't understand the flesh. They're separate. They're two different things. You can't be a believer with one foot in and one foot out. I remember years ago, there was a brother who I was mentoring. He was a very good friend of mine. He still is. And as I was mentoring him, this was a brother who had got saved. He was growing in the Lord. He was doing great. And he had had a few years of growth underneath him. And now he was discovering, in fact, he had cut off all dating. He quit dating all girls because he saw that even though he was a believer, he would still go down typical paths that he did in the past. And he had to retrain his mind. So he quit dating completely for a while. And I remember he started dating again, and he met a girl at the church, and he fell into a trap or a snare that I see many believers do. You see, there are so many young men and young women out there. When I say young men or young women, really you can be of any age as long as you're old enough to get married is what I would say, and have that desire to have a spouse. Maybe you've been married before and you want a spouse again because that one didn't work out, or you want one for the first time. Maybe you've never been married. Well, this guy had never been married, and he highly desired to have a wife. So he was seeking God for one. Well, sometimes when we do that, we can find people that we think have all the right qualifications. They have the right Christian lingo. They turn around and they go to church. They read their Bible. They're part of small groups. And so we think, hey, check, check, check. That person's for me. And they they engage with each other. And what I mean by engage is not getting engaged like marriage, but I mean they engage with each other. They interact with each other and they start hanging out. Well, as they do that, that is how sometimes you lead to marriage, but you have to be careful what happens within the relationship. This brother, he turned around, and unfortunately he did like most people did. They started playing husband and wife, and they weren't married yet. I mean, he started trying to fulfill the role of her husband. He started trying to lead her. He also started trying to be a father to her child. And at the same time, she was trying to fulfill those roles for him. And we have to be careful about how we interact with others when we're seeking that. You must always have an accountability system. In this particular scenario, I can remember a time where he came to me and he was really struggling because he was ready to be married to her. She was ready to be married to him. And they were hearing the lie that the devil tells so many people that, hey, you're going to be her husband anyway. And to the girl, you're going to be his wife anyways. Why not just come together? Why not just start having intimate relations with each other? Which is false, because until there's a ring on, there is no action that's supposed to happen. And so I remember I used to attend a church, and the pastor there, the youth pastor there, used to say, no ringy, no dingy. And so anyways, what I would tell you about that is that, they started playing husband and wife with each other. And I told him, brother, you got to be careful. I remember one night my wife and I are out of town, and I get a phone call, and it's late. I mean, it's around 10 o'clock, not too bad, but a little late. And I pick up the phone, and it's with this brother on the phone. And for about the first minute, he's apologizing to me profusely over and over again. Brother, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I called you so late. I'm so sorry. I said, brother, I gave you my number, and I told you to call me anytime. Whether if it's just want to say hi, or if it's for accountability as a dung partner that you need me to be there for you. What's going on? And he was in tears. He was a wreck. And what I mean by a wreck is he was spiritually at a place where he felt so lost and disconnected. You see, he had went over to this girl's house, and even though he knew the boundaries he was to watch, he kept breaking those boundaries. The boundaries that we set up through accountability, he kept breaking the boundaries. And as he did, they turned around and he would go over and they'd watch a little movies, hang out a little bit. The kid went to bed and they'd start cuddling on the couch. One thing leads to another. And before you know it, he's running out of the house, trying to put his clothes back on, calling me in tears. Now, praise God, a trespass did not occur there. However, there was boundaries that were broken. And so I talked to him, we spoke about it, he was remorseful, we prayed about it, and when I got back in town, we got together. And I said, brother, the Apostle Paul talked about this, and he said that if there is a member of the body that's causing you to sin, it is better for you to cut that member of your body off than continue to go down and sin. And the Apostle Paul said that if you have an eye, your eyes are causing you to sin, better for you to pluck it out than to continue sinning. If you have a hand that's causing you to sin, better for you to cut it off than continue to go in sin. Now, I'm not trying to tell you to go self-mutilate yourself. In fact, that is the opposite of what I'm saying. Spiritually, what I am saying is that you have to recognize where the desires and temptations are ruling you within your life, and then you have to cut it off. It's not about correcting it. It's not about changing it. If you haven't put the accountability steps in your life, then you need to do that. But if you have put the accountability steps in your life and you're continuing to go down the same road over and over again, then it might be you just need to weed eat or allow the Lord to pull that weed out of your life and plant something there better instead. We have to be so careful about trying to smash square pegs into round holes. You know, as children, they used to have that shape. I don't think they have them anymore, but they used to have that shape block. And you'd have like triangles and squares and circles and things. And you'd have these blocks and you'd have to fit it in. But even if you like had a square one and you tried to stick it in the circle, it might seem like it was going in, but it'd never go in because it had to go in the square peg hole. Well, that's the same way when we're walking as believers. I will tell you that that brother cut that relationship off. It hurt him. It hurt her. It hurt that whole situation. But giving it over to God, He healed that situation. And I will tell you that just a short while later, both those people got married, but not to each other. You see, by them cutting that sin off, it freed the guy to marry the girl that God had for him. And it freed the girl to marry the guy that He had for her. When we crucify the flesh, it is us putting the desires of the flesh down and allowing the Lord to grow bigger in us and us decrease in self. Guys, I hope you found this teaching a blessing. As always, we want to remind you to connect with us at our website at nealreyes.com, where you can find all of our teaching resources. We also stream our resources 24 hours a day on YouTube. You can connect with them on our website, or you can go to our YouTube channel at Neal Reyes Ministries. We want to remind you that Jesus is Lord and He loves you, and so do we. Thank you, and have a blessed day.